The Weaver's Cottage in the Woods. Sarah lived in a city apartment on the 14th floor. From her window, she could see other apartment buildings, streets full of cars, the gray sky above. She was 42 years old and worked as a project manager at a large company. She had worked there for 18 years. Her days followed the same pattern. Wake at 6:30, shower, dress in business clothes, coffee and toast, commute on the crowded subway, arrive at the office by 8, meetings, emails, deadlines, problems to solve. Lunch at her desk, more meetings, more emails, leave at 6 or later. Crowded subway home, microwave dinner, television, sleep, repeat. Sarah had once enjoyed her work. She had felt challenged, engaged, important. But somewhere over the years, that feeling had faded. Now, work felt like an endless stream of tasks, each requiring her attention, but none bringing satisfaction. She felt like a machine, processing information, making decisions, keeping projects on schedule. Her personal life was equally empty. She had no partner, few friends. Her family lived far away. On weekends, she would clean her apartment, do laundry, buy groceries. Sometimes she would go to a movie alone. Mostly, she felt tired. Always tired, despite sleeping 8 hours most nights. One Sunday in late October, Sarah woke feeling a deep restlessness. She couldn't face another day in her apartment, another week at the office. She needed to get out, to go somewhere different. She had read about a nature preserve an hour outside the city. Forest trails, a lake, autumn colors. It seemed perfect. Sarah dressed in comfortable clothes, jeans, sweater, hiking boots she had bought years ago but rarely worn. She took the train to the edge of the city, then a bus into the countryside. The preserve was beautiful. The trees were brilliant with autumn color, reds, oranges, yellows, golds. The air was crisp and clean, smelling of fallen leaves and earth. Sarah walked slowly along a trail that wound through the forest. It was quiet, peaceful, just the sound of wind and trees, birds calling, her footsteps on the leaf-covered path. Sarah felt some of her tension begin to ease. She hadn't realized how much she needed this: nature, silence, space. She walked for hours, losing track of time. The trail wound deeper into the forest, away from the parking area, away from other hikers. Sarah didn't mind. She liked being alone here, surrounded by trees, far from the city's noise and pressure. As afternoon turned toward evening, Sarah realized she needed to head back. The days were getting shorter. She didn't want to be in the forest after dark. But when she looked around, trying to orient herself, she realized she wasn't sure which way led back. She had been walking without paying attention to direction, lost in her thoughts. Now she looked at the trees and trails, and they all looked the same. Which way had she come from? Sarah felt a flutter of panic. She was lost, alone in a forest with evening approaching. She had no camping gear, no real supplies, just a water bottle and some snacks in her small backpack.
She tried to retrace her steps, but nothing looked familiar. She walked for 20 minutes, then realized she might be going deeper into the forest rather than toward the parking area. She stopped, trying to think clearly. That's when she saw it. Smoke rising above the trees. Not thick, dark smoke like a wildfire. Thin, white smoke like from a chimney. Someone's house? A ranger station? Whatever it was, it meant people, help, direction. Sarah left the trail and walked toward the smoke. She pushed through underbrush, climbed over fallen logs, followed that thin line of white smoke rising into the darkening sky. She came to a clearing. In the center stood a small cottage made of stone and wood. It looked old but well maintained. Smoke rose from its chimney. Warm light glowed from the windows. A garden surrounded the cottage, beds of herbs and vegetables neatly tended. A chicken coop stood to one side. A small shed held stacked firewood. Sarah approached cautiously. The cottage looked like something from a fairy tale, too perfect to be real. But it was real. She could smell the wood smoke, could see curtains moving in the window. She knocked on the door. After a moment, it opened. A woman stood there, perhaps 60 years old, with long gray hair and a thick braid. She wore a simple dress and apron. Her face was kind but curious. "Hello," the woman said. "Can I help you?" "I'm sorry to bother you. I was hiking and got lost. I saw your smoke and hoped you could give me directions back to the parking area." The woman looked at the sky, which was quickly darkening. "It's late. The preserve is large and the paths are confusing in the dark. You should stay here tonight. I'll show you the way out in the morning." Sarah hesitated. Stay with a stranger? In a cottage in the woods? It seemed unwise, but the alternative was wandering the forest in the dark, possibly getting more lost. At least the woman seemed kind. "Are you sure?" Sarah asked. "I don't want to impose." "It's no imposition," the woman said. "I'm Anna. Please come in. You must be tired and hungry." Sarah stepped inside. The cottage was one large room with a sleeping loft above. A fire burned in a stone fireplace. The room was warm and cozy, lit by candles and oil lamps. Sarah saw a simple kitchen area, a wooden table and chairs, shelves full of jars and baskets, and in one corner a large wooden loom. The loom caught Sarah's attention. It was beautiful. Old wood polished by years of use, complex threads stretched across its frame, a partially completed piece of cloth showing an intricate pattern of natural colors. "You're a weaver," Sarah said. "Yes," Anna smiled. "That's how I make my living. I weave cloth and sell it in the village. It's quiet work, but I enjoy it. Now, let me make you some tea and supper." Anna moved efficiently around the small kitchen. She put a kettle on the wood stove, sliced bread, ladled stew from a pot. Sarah sat at the table, watching, still processing where she was. A cottage in the woods, a weaver. It seemed unreal, disconnected from her normal life of offices and subways and apartment buildings. They ate together. Simple food but delicious. Homemade bread, vegetable stew, herbal tea. Anna asked gentle questions about Sarah. Where she lived, what she did. Sarah found herself talking more than she usually did, perhaps because Anna listened with such attention. "I work as a project manager," Sarah explained. "I coordinate people, keep schedules, solve problems. It's fine, it pays well, but I feel—" She paused, surprised at her own honesty. "I feel like I'm going through the motions, like I'm sleepwalking through my life." Anna nodded. "Many people feel that way," she said. "They've built lives that look successful from the outside but feel empty inside. The pattern they're following doesn't fit who they really are." "The pattern?" Sarah asked. "Life is like weaving," Anna said. "We follow patterns, some we choose, some we inherit, some we don't even notice. But sometimes a pattern that worked at one point stops working. The cloth doesn't come out right. That's when we need to break the old pattern and create a new one." Sarah looked at the loom in the corner. "Is that what weaving taught you?" "Weaving teaches many things," Anna said. "Patience, attention, the importance of each individual thread, the beauty of simple repetition, how small choices accumulate into larger designs, how to fix mistakes without starting over completely." They talked late into the evening. Anna told Sarah about her life, how she had left the city 20 years ago, had found this cottage, had taught herself weaving, had built a simple life here. She seemed content, at peace in a way Sarah had never felt. Finally, Anna showed Sarah to a small guest bed in the loft. Sarah climbed the ladder, exhausted but with her mind full of thoughts. She lay in the comfortable bed, looking up at the wooden ceiling, listening to the fire crackling below and wind in the trees outside. She thought about patterns, about the pattern of her life, the same routine, day after day, year after year, a pattern that once fit but didn't anymore. What would it take to break that pattern, to weave something new? Sarah fell asleep thinking about threads and looms and the possibility of different life patterns.
Sarah woke to sunlight streaming through a small window. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then she remembered the cottage, Anna, getting lost in the forest. She climbed down from the loft. Anna was already awake, working at her loom. Her hands moved with practiced rhythm, the shuttle passing back and forth, threads clicking into place. The sound was soothing, meditative. "Good morning," Anna said, looking up. "I've made breakfast. Help yourself." On the table was porridge, honey, fresh bread, and tea. Sarah ate while watching Anna work. The weaver's movements were graceful and precise, each motion exactly what was needed, nothing wasted or hurried. After breakfast, Anna led Sarah outside to show her the way back to the preserve entrance. They walked together through the forest, Anna pointing out landmarks Sarah had missed before. "The trails are confusing if you don't know them," Anna explained. "But once you learn the markers, this particular oak tree, that outcropping of rock, the way the path curves, you can't get lost anymore." At the preserve entrance, Sarah thanked Anna for her hospitality. She wanted to say more, that the evening had meant something to her, that Anna's words about patterns and weaving had struck something deep, but she didn't know how to express it. Anna seemed to understand anyway. "You're welcome to visit again," she said. "If you want to learn about weaving, I can teach you. The door is always open." Sarah took the bus and train back to the city. Her apartment felt even smaller and more confining than before. The city noise seemed harsh after the forest's quiet. Sarah felt like she had visited another world, one that ran on different rules, slower rhythms, deeper meaning. She went to work Monday morning, but couldn't focus. She kept thinking about the cottage, about Anna at her loom, about the possibility of a different kind of life. In meetings, she found herself drifting, imagining threading a loom instead of managing schedules. That weekend, Sarah returned to the forest. She told herself she just wanted to hike again, but she knew the truth. She wanted to see Anna, wanted to return to that peaceful cottage, wanted to learn about weaving. She found the cottage easily this time, recognizing the landmarks Anna had shown her. She knocked on the door. Anna opened it and smiled, unsurprised. "I thought you might come back," Anna said. "Would you like to learn to weave?" "Yes," Sarah said, "I would." Anna showed Sarah the basics. She explained how a loom worked. The warp threads stretched vertically, the weft threads woven horizontally through them. She demonstrated threading, showed how different patterns were created by varying which threads were lifted. Then she gave Sarah a simple project, weaving a scarf on a small table loom. Anna helped her thread it, showed her how to work the shuttle, let her begin. At first, she was clumsy. Her tension was uneven, her edges wavy, her rhythm halting. But Anna was patient. "Everyone starts this way," Anna said. "Weaving is about repetition. Your hands will learn, your rhythm will develop. Just keep going." Sarah worked for hours, slowly finding a rhythm. Pass the shuttle through, beat the threads down, change the shed, pass the shuttle back. Over and over, the same motions gradually becoming smoother, more natural. She discovered something unexpected. Weaving quieted her mind. The repetitive motion was meditative. She couldn't think about work problems or life stress while weaving. She had to focus on the immediate task, the thread in her hands, the pattern emerging. When she finally stopped, evening had arrived. Sarah looked at what she had created, several inches of scarf, uneven and imperfect, but real. She had made this with her own hands from thread and patience. "It's not perfect," Sarah said, touching the cloth. "Nothing is," Anna replied, "but it's honest. It shows your hand, your learning. That's valuable. Perfection is overrated. Authenticity is what matters." Sarah stayed for dinner again. They talked about weaving, about the different fibers, wool, cotton, linen, silk, about natural dyes made from plants, about how weaving was one of humanity's oldest crafts, practiced for thousands of years. "Weaving connects us to history," Anna said. "When you work at a loom, you're doing what people have done for millennia. It's grounding. It reminds you that you're part of something larger than yourself." As Sarah rode the train home that night, she felt different, calmer, more centered. She looked at her hands. She could still feel the texture of the thread, the rhythm of the shuttle. She had spent the day making something, and it had felt more meaningful than months of her office work. She continued returning to the cottage every weekend. Anna would have projects ready for her: scarves, placemats, small wall hangings. Sarah's skills improved. Her weaving became more even, her patterns more complex. Her hands learned the work, developing calluses, growing strong. But she was learning more than technique. She was learning patience, how rushing ruined the work, how steady rhythm achieved more than frantic speed. She was learning acceptance, how imperfection was inevitable and could be beautiful. Anna would work at her own loom while Sarah worked at the small one, both women weaving in companionable silence. Sometimes they would talk about life, about choices, about what truly mattered. Sometimes they would just weave, the only sounds the click of shuttles and the gentle beat of threads. Winter came. Sarah continued her weekend trips to the cottage, traveling even when snow fell. She bought proper winter hiking gear and learned to love the forest in all seasons. Winter woods had their own beauty: bare trees stark against snow, animal tracks telling stories, the crystalline silence of cold days. Anna's cottage was especially cozy in winter. The fire burned constantly. They would drink hot tea and weave for hours, warm inside while wind howled outside. Sarah brought provisions from the city: coffee, chocolate, dried fruits, contributions to Anna's simple larder. Sarah's weaving skills had developed significantly. She could now work independently, creating her own patterns, choosing her own colors. She had completed several scarves, a set of placemats, a small blanket. Anna suggested she try selling some pieces. "There's a craft market in the village," Anna said. "Every month, people sell handmade goods, pottery, woodwork, preserves, cloth. You could set up a small table, see if your work finds buyers." Sarah felt nervous. Sell her weaving? It seemed presumptuous. She was just a beginner, not a real weaver. But Anna encouraged her. "You're not a beginner anymore," Anna said. "You've been learning for months. Your work is good, and more importantly, it's honest. People can feel that when something is made with attention and care." The next market day, Sarah went with Anna. They set up tables side by side. Anna's work was beautiful, intricate patterns in natural colors, cloth so fine and even it seemed almost impossible to believe it was handmade. Sarah's work was simpler, but Anna had helped her display it attractively. People came through the market, browsing, buying. Several stopped at Sarah's table. They picked up her scarves, felt the texture, examined the weave. Some moved on, but a few made purchases. By the end of the day, Sarah had sold 3 scarves and 2 placemats. It wasn't much money, but it wasn't about money. It was about strangers choosing her work, valuing something she had made. Someone would wear the scarf she had woven, would use the placemats in their home. Her hands and her time had created something that now belonged to the world. That evening, as they packed up, Sarah felt proud, genuinely proud in a way she hadn't felt about her corporate work in years. She had made things, real, tangible, useful, beautiful things, and people had wanted them. "This is what I should be doing," Sarah said suddenly. "Not managing projects, making things, creating with my hands." Anna smiled. "Maybe, but don't rush. Keep learning, keep weaving. The path will become clear in its own time." But Sarah felt urgency now. She was 42. She had spent 18 years in a career that didn't fulfill her. How many more years did she want to waste? She began to imagine a different life, leaving the city, finding a place like Anna's, weaving full-time. The fantasy was compelling but terrifying. Leave her job? Give up her salary, her benefits, her security? Move to the countryside where she knew no one? Learn to live as Anna did, simply, frugally, connected to seasons and handwork? It seemed impossible, yet also more possible than it had seemed 6 months ago, before she had found Anna's cottage, before she had discovered weaving. Sarah started researching seriously. She looked at property in rural areas. She calculated how much money she had saved, how long it could support her. She read about homesteading, about simple living, about people who had left conventional careers to pursue crafts. She also spent more time at the cottage. Instead of just weekends, she started taking vacation days from work, spending entire weeks with Anna. She learned to do more than weave, to prepare her own threads, to spin wool, to dye cloth with plants. She helped Anna with her garden, learned to preserve vegetables, bake bread, tend chickens. Anna's lifestyle required many skills. She wasn't just a weaver. She was a gardener, a cook, a woodswoman, a careful manager of resources. Everything was used, nothing wasted. Scraps became compost. Clothing was mended until it couldn't be mended anymore, then became rags. Water was conserved. Electricity was minimal, just enough for refrigeration and a few lights. This is how people lived for most of human history, Anna explained. Mindfully, carefully, aware of resources. Modern life makes us careless. Everything is abundant, available, disposable. We've forgotten how to live simply. Sarah was learning. She discovered she liked the challenge of it, figuring out how to do more with less, how to be resourceful, how to appreciate what she had. Her city life suddenly seemed wasteful and complicated. One evening in early spring, after Sarah had been learning from Anna for almost 6 months, they sat by the fire after dinner. Sarah had been quiet all day, thinking.
"I want to do what you did," Sarah said finally. "Leave my job, find a place in the country, live simply and weave. But I'm scared. What if I fail? What if I can't make it work?" Anna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You might fail. I can't promise you won't. Living this way is hard. You'll have less money, less security, more uncertainty. You'll work very hard for modest returns. Some people try it and go back to conventional life." She paused, then continued, "But failure isn't the worst thing. The worst thing is not trying, living your whole life wondering what if, dying with your dreams unexplored. If you try and fail, you'll learn, you'll grow, you'll have stories and experiences. If you don't try, you'll just have regrets." "How did you know to do this?" Sarah asked. "How did you have the courage?" "I didn't know," Anna admitted. "I was terrified. I made plenty of mistakes. The first few years were very hard, but I was more afraid of staying in my old life, more afraid of continuing to feel empty and lost than I was of the unknown. That fear of staying stuck was stronger than my fear of change." Anna understood. She felt the same way. She was more afraid of spending another 18 years managing projects than she was of trying something completely different. "I'm going to do it," Sarah said. "I'm going to quit my job, find a place, learn to live this way." Anna smiled.
Good. I'll help you. But take your time. Plan carefully. Don't rush. This isn't an escape. It's a transformation. Do it thoughtfully.
Sarah gave 6 months' notice at her job. Her boss was shocked, but couldn't change her mind. Her co-workers thought she was having a breakdown. Who quits a good job to become a weaver? But Sarah was certain. Those 6 months she prepared. She saved aggressively, spending almost nothing. She researched rural areas, looking for affordable property near Anna's village. She bought a good loom and weaving supplies. She practiced constantly, improving her skills, building inventory to sell. She also began releasing things. Her apartment was full of stuff, furniture she didn't love, clothes she didn't wear, books she'd never read, kitchen equipment she never used. Sarah sold or donated most of it. She kept only what was essential or truly meaningful. The process was liberating. She had accumulated so much without realizing it, physical clutter that matched her mental clutter. Letting go of possessions felt like letting go of old ways of being. She was making space for new life to emerge. Anna helped her look for property. They drove around the countryside on weekends, looking at small houses, cottages, parcels of land. Most were too expensive or unsuitable, but finally they found something perfect. It was a small one-room cabin on 2 acres of land. Very basic, just the cabin, a shed, and a well. But the land was beautiful, with a meadow, a small stream, good soil for gardening. The price was within Sarah's budget. The location was only a mile from Anna's cottage. Sarah made an offer. It was accepted. She would own the cabin when her notice period ended, when she officially left her city life and began her new rural life. Those final months in the city felt surreal. Sarah went through the motions at work, but her heart was already gone. She was mentally preparing for her new life, reading about gardening and food preservation and sustainable living. She was counting down days. Her last day at the office arrived. There was a small party, cake, polite goodbyes. People wished her luck, though most clearly thought she was making a mistake. Sarah didn't care. She felt free, excited, ready. She hired a small truck, loaded her few remaining possessions, drove out of the city. She watched the buildings give way to suburbs, then countryside. She felt layers of stress falling away with each mile. The cabin was tiny, just one room with a sleeping loft, a wood stove, a simple kitchen counter. No running water yet, she would have to install plumbing. No heat except the stove, just basics. But Sarah loved it. The cabin was hers, and it sat in the middle of beautiful nature. Anna helped her move in, helped her organize the space. Sarah set up her loom in the main room, where light from the window would fall on it. She arranged her small kitchen, made the loft comfortable for sleeping. It took only a few hours. She had so little. That first night alone in the cabin, Sarah lay in bed listening to unfamiliar sounds, insects, night birds, wind in trees, small animals moving in the undergrowth. No sirens, no traffic, no neighbors' televisions through thin walls, just nature sounds, which gradually felt like music. Sarah felt profoundly at peace. She had done it. She had changed her life completely. She was exactly where she needed to be.
The next morning, she woke with the sun. No alarm clock, just natural light and bird song. She made coffee on her propane camp stove. She would install proper cooking facilities later. She ate simple breakfast, then she sat at her loom and began to weave. This was her work now. This was her life. Threading and weaving, pattern emerging slowly, creating something beautiful and useful with her hands and her time.
The first months in the cabin were challenging. Sarah had to learn so many practical skills. How to manage the wood stove efficiently, keeping the cabin warm without burning through all her firewood. How to hand pump water from the well for washing and cooking. How to deal with lack of bathroom facilities. She installed a composting toilet, which took adjustment. She also had to manage money carefully. She had savings, but they wouldn't last forever. She needed to support herself through weaving, which meant producing enough quality work to sell regularly. Anna was invaluable. She taught Sarah not just weaving, but all the skills of simple living. They planted a large garden together, vegetables, herbs, flowers for dye. Anna showed Sarah how to preserve food, canning, drying, root cellaring, how to forage in the forest for wild foods, how to barter with neighbors, trading woven goods for eggs, produce, firewood. Sarah discovered she loved the physicality of this life. She was using her body constantly, hauling water, chopping wood, working the loom, tending the garden. She grew strong and lean. The chronic tension in her shoulders and back disappeared. She slept deeply and woke refreshed. She also loved the rhythm. Her days followed natural patterns, waking with sunrise, working while light was good, resting in evenings. She moved with the seasons, planting in spring, tending in summer, harvesting in autumn, resting more in winter. Time felt different here. Days sometimes felt long. There was so much to do, so much physical work. But weeks passed quickly. She would look up from her work and realize another month had gone by. Time became less a series of appointments and deadlines and more a natural flow of seasons and cycles. Sarah's weaving improved significantly. Weaving every day for hours, her skills developed rapidly. Her work became more refined, her patterns more complex, her cloth more even and beautiful. She developed her own aesthetic, natural fibers and muted colors, simple patterns that let the cloth speak for itself. She started selling regularly at the monthly market. She also connected with shops in nearby towns that sold handcrafted goods. Her income was modest but sufficient for her simple needs. She wasn't getting rich, but she was supporting herself doing work she loved. But more than the craft itself, Sarah valued what weaving taught her. Each piece required patience. Rushing ruined the work. Each required sustained attention. One careless moment could create a mistake that took hours to fix. Each required presence. You couldn't weave while thinking about something else. Weaving became a meditation practice. Sitting at the loom, hands moving in rhythm, mind quiet and focused. Hours would pass in what felt like minutes. Sarah would emerge from weaving sessions feeling calm, centered, connected to something deeper than her ordinary thoughts. She began to understand what Anna had said about patterns. Weaving was literally about patterns, which threads to lift, which colors to use, how to create design through systematic repetition.
But it was also metaphorically about patterns, the patterns we follow in life, often without realizing it. Sarah's old pattern had been achievement, productivity, accumulation. Work hard, make money, buy things, repeat. That pattern had brought success, but not satisfaction. Her new pattern was simpler. Make things, live simply, connect with nature and seasons, focus on quality over quantity. This pattern fit her better. The cloth of her life was coming out right. As her first year in the cabin approached, Sarah reflected on the transformation. A year ago, she had been a stressed city dweller, managing projects she didn't care about, living alone in a small apartment, feeling empty and lost. Now she was a weaver living in a cabin in the woods, growing her own food, making cloth with her hands, connected to a community of makers and to the land itself. She had less money, fewer possessions, no conventional security, but she was happier than she had ever been. She wasn't naive about the challenges. Winter had been hard. The cabin was cold, the isolation sometimes difficult, money was tight. She had worked harder physically than she ever had in her office job. Her hands were rough, her back sometimes ached. She went to bed tired every night. But it was good tired, honest tired, the tiredness of muscles used, of meaningful work completed, of challenges met. Not the soul-deep exhaustion of meaningless labor, of feeling like a cog in a machine, of living a pattern that didn't fit. Anna came over one evening to share dinner and to celebrate Sarah's first year in the cabin. They ate simple food, vegetables from the garden, bread Sarah had baked, cheese from a neighbor's goats. After dinner, they sat outside watching the stars.
"You've done well," Anna said. "Not just survived, but thrived. You've built a good life here." "I couldn't have done it without you," Sarah said. "You taught me everything, not just weaving, but how to live this way, how to be content with enough, how to find meaning in simple work." "I shared what I knew," Anna said, "but you did the hard part. You had the courage to change. Many people want to change, but few actually do it. You did." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to crickets and frogs, watching fireflies drift across the meadow. Sarah felt content, completely, deeply content, in a way she had never felt before. Her life made sense now. The pattern fit. She was weaving her days into something beautiful and true. As Sarah's second year began, she discovered something unexpected. She wasn't alone. The area around Anna's village was home to many people like her, people who had left conventional lives to pursue crafts, to live simply, to focus on making. There was Marcus, a potter who worked from a small studio behind his house, making functional stoneware that he sold at markets and through local shops. There was Elena, a basket maker, who wove beautiful willow baskets for storage and display. There were woodworkers, blacksmiths, soap makers, herbalists, cheese makers. They formed an informal community of makers. They would gather at markets to sell their work, but also just to connect, to share techniques and ideas, to support each other. They traded goods, Sarah's woven cloth for Marcus's bowls, Elena's baskets for someone else's preserves. Sarah loved being part of this community. These were her people, people who valued handwork,
who had chosen meaningful labor over high salaries, who understood what it meant to support yourself through craft. They spoke the same language, shared the same values. They started organizing gatherings beyond the markets. Once a month, they would meet at someone's studio or home for a potluck dinner and skill sharing. Someone might demonstrate a technique, Elena showing how she prepared willow for weaving, Marcus explaining his glazing process, Anna teaching natural dyeing. These gatherings nourished Sarah. She was learning constantly, expanding her skills beyond just weaving. She learned basic pottery, tried basketry, experimented with natural dyes. She discovered she liked the variety. Weaving was her primary work, but she enjoyed dabbling in other crafts. She also appreciated the social connection. Living alone in her cabin was mostly wonderful, but sometimes lonely. The gatherings gave her regular human contact, conversation, friendship. She was building a life that balanced solitude and community. One member of the maker community was a man named Thomas. He was perhaps 50, a furniture maker who created beautiful pieces from local wood, cherry, walnut, oak. He had been living this way for 20 years, having left a career in finance. Thomas and Sarah became friends. They had similar stories, corporate careers abandoned, new lives built around craft, no regrets about the choice. Thomas understood what Sarah had been through, the courage it had taken to change, the challenges of the craft life.
They started spending time together beyond the group gatherings. Thomas would visit Sarah's cabin, helping with projects that needed carpentry skills, building better shelves, improving her workspace, constructing a simple greenhouse. Sarah would visit his workshop, sitting quietly while he worked, sometimes trying her hand at simple woodworking. A friendship grew, then something more. Not urgent or dramatic, just a gradual deepening. They were both independent people who valued solitude, but they discovered they enjoyed sharing their lives. By the end of Sarah's second year in the cabin, Thomas was spending most nights there. Thomas built an addition to the cabin, a second room that could serve as a larger weaving studio for Sarah and a wood shop for him. They worked side by side, she at her loom, he at his workbench, content in each other's company, pursuing their separate crafts while sharing their lives. This was different from Sarah's previous relationships. Those had been about filling empty time, about seeking completion from another person. This was about two complete people choosing to share their completeness. Thomas didn't fill a void in Sarah's life. She had no void. He simply enhanced what was already good. They talked about getting married, but decided against it. They didn't need legal recognition of their relationship. They were committed to each other in the ways that mattered, supporting each other's work, caring for each other's well-being, building a shared life while respecting individual autonomy. Sarah's weaving continued to develop. She was taking on more complex projects, blankets, rugs, upholstery fabric. Her work was becoming known in the region. Galleries in larger towns wanted to carry it. Interior designers commissioned custom pieces. She could have expanded, hired help, turned her craft into a bigger business, but she chose not to. She didn't want to become a manager again, didn't want to lose the direct relationship with her work. She kept her production modest, focused on quality, maintained control over every step.
I left my corporate job because I wanted to make things with my hands, she explained to Thomas when he asked about expansion. If I start managing other weavers, I'll just be back where I started, managing instead of making. I'd rather stay small and stay connected to the work. Thomas understood. He faced the same choice with his furniture making. He could have grown his business, opened a larger workshop, hired apprentices, but he preferred working alone, maintaining his direct connection to the wood, the tools, the craft.
In Sarah's 4th year at the cabin, something unexpected happened. A young woman showed up at her door asking about apprenticeship. Her name was Maya. She was 26. She had been working as a graphic designer but felt unfulfilled. She had read an article about the maker community in the area and wanted to learn weaving. Sarah hesitated. She had never taught anyone before. She barely considered herself qualified. She had only been weaving seriously for 4 years. But Anna encouraged her. "You have knowledge worth sharing," Anna said. "You remember what it's like to be a beginner. That makes you a good teacher. And teaching deepens your own understanding." Sarah agreed to take Maya on for a trial period. Maya moved into a small rental in the village and came to Sarah's cabin 3 days a week to learn. Sarah taught her as Anna had taught her, showing basic techniques, giving simple projects, emphasizing patience and attention over speed and perfection.
Maya was an eager student. She had good hands, picked up techniques quickly. More importantly, she had the right mindset. She understood that weaving wasn't just about making cloth, but about cultivating a way of being, a practice of mindfulness and presence. Sarah discovered she loved teaching. Explaining techniques helped her understand them more deeply. Watching Maya's progress reminded Sarah of her own journey, of how far she had come. She felt proud to be passing knowledge forward, continuing the chain that ran from Anna to her to Maya. After 6 months, Maya was ready to set up her own small loom and begin weaving independently. She found a cabin to rent near Sarah's and began building her own craft practice. She still came to Sarah regularly for guidance and critique, but she was on her own path now. Word spread that Sarah was teaching. Other people asked about apprenticeships. Sarah was careful about who she accepted. She only took students who seemed genuinely committed, who understood that craft life wasn't romantic or easy, who were willing to work hard for modest rewards. Over the next few years, Sarah taught 5 apprentices. 2 eventually moved away, deciding craft life wasn't for them after all, but 3 stayed, setting up their own practices in the area, becoming part of the maker community. Sarah felt proud of them, felt she was contributing to keeping the craft alive, passing knowledge to the next generation. Anna watched this with satisfaction. "This is how it works," she told Sarah. "Each generation learns from the previous, then teaches the next. Knowledge flows forward. Craft survives. You're doing what I did for you, giving someone the tools to transform their life." Sarah understood now that Anna had given her more than weaving skills. Anna had modeled an alternative way of living, had shown that simple life, centered on craft, was possible and satisfying. Sarah was now modeling that for others, showing young people that they didn't have to follow conventional career paths, that they could choose meaning over money. Not everyone who visited or apprenticed stayed. Most went back to their old lives, but some changed as Sarah had changed. They found courage to leave unfulfilling careers, to move to the countryside, to learn crafts, to build simpler lives focused on making. Sarah began to understand her role in a larger movement. All across the country, people were making similar choices, leaving cities, learning traditional crafts, building communities of makers. It was a quiet revolution, a turning away from consumer culture toward producer culture, from virtual work toward physical work, from complexity toward simplicity. She was part of something larger than herself, larger than her individual life and choices. She was part of a reawakening of craft, a return to older ways of making and being.
Years passed. Sarah moved through her late 40s into her 50s. Her life had a rhythm now, patterns that repeated with the seasons, satisfying in their predictability and variation. Spring was for planting, the garden, but also new projects. Sarah would design new weaving patterns in spring, experiment with new techniques, start ambitious pieces that would take months to complete. Spring energy, green and growing, infused her work. Summer was for production. Long days meant long hours at the loom. Sarah would weave steadily, building inventory for the fall market season. The rhythm of summer weaving was satisfying. The same motions repeated hour after hour, day after day, cloth accumulating slowly and steadily.
Autumn was for selling and preserving. Markets happened most weekends, Sarah and Thomas traveling to different towns to sell their work. The income from autumn markets would support them through winter. Autumn was also for harvesting and preserving garden produce, for preparing firewood, for winterizing the cabin. Winter was for rest and learning. Shorter days meant less weaving time. Sarah would work on smaller personal projects, experiment with new techniques without the pressure of needing to sell. She would read, think, plan for spring. Winter's quiet allowed for reflection. This seasonal rhythm felt right to Sarah. She had never lived this way before, so connected to natural cycles, so attuned to weather and light. Her body knew what season it was without checking a calendar. She could feel it in the air, see it in the angle of light, hear it in bird song. Her weaving had become masterful. After 10 years of daily practice, her hands knew exactly what to do. She could weave complex patterns without thinking, her hands moving automatically while her mind rested in meditation. Her cloth was beautiful, even, strong, perfectly balanced. She was known now throughout the region. Sarah the Weaver, people called her. Gallery owners competed to carry her work. Interior designers sought her out for custom pieces. She could have raised her prices significantly, could have been wealthy by craft standards, but she kept her prices modest. She didn't need much money. Her life was simple, her expenses low. She wanted her work to be accessible, wanted regular people to be able to afford hand-woven cloth. She believed in craft as democratic art, as something for everyone, not just collectors. Thomas's furniture making had flourished similarly. His work was sought after, his pieces admired for their simple beauty and solid construction. Like Sarah, he could have expanded and gotten rich. Like Sarah, he chose to stay small and stay true to his craft. They lived well on their modest incomes. The cabin was comfortable now. Thomas had improved it over the years, adding insulation, a real bathroom, a wood cook stove, a larger studio. The garden produced abundantly. They bartered with neighbors for dairy, meat, other goods. They needed little from the outside economy. Anna was aging now, in her late 70s. She still wove, but more slowly, taking frequent breaks, working shorter hours. Sarah and Thomas helped her with physical tasks, chopping wood, maintaining her cottage, heavy garden work. Anna had given Sarah so much, it felt good to give back. The maker community had grown. There were now over 20 craftsfolk in the area, enough to support regular events and collaborations. They organized an annual craft fair that drew visitors from hours away. They started a craft school, offering week-long intensive workshops in various traditional skills. Sarah taught weaving workshops at the school each summer. Students would come from cities, spending a week learning basic weaving, working with their hands, experiencing a taste of craft life. Some were just curious tourists, but some were like Sarah had been, seeking something different, wondering if another life was possible. Sarah would tell her story when students asked, not to brag or convince, but to offer example. I was 42 when I started. I had no experience, no artistic background. I just felt called to weaving, to craft, to simpler life. If I could do it, maybe you can too. Some students went home inspired. A few came back, moved to the area, apprenticed with someone, began their own craft journeys. Sarah watched these transformations with satisfaction. Each person who chose craft over convention, who chose meaningful work over meaningless prosperity, was a small victory for the movement.
When Sarah was 55, Anna became seriously ill. Her heart was failing. She was 80 years old, had lived a long and good life, but her time was ending. Sarah visited daily, helping however she could, sitting with Anna, sharing quiet company. One afternoon, Anna asked Sarah to bring her loom to the cottage. She wanted to show Sarah one final technique, a complex pattern she had never shared. Sarah set up her portable loom, and Anna, weak but determined, showed her the pattern, threading and lifting sequences that created an intricate design. "This pattern is very old," Anna explained. "It was taught to me by my teacher, who learned it from hers, going back generations. I've kept it special, saved it for the right moment to pass on. I'm giving it to you now. You'll know when to teach it to someone else." Sarah wove while Anna guided her, learning the pattern, committing it to memory and to her hands. It was beautiful, complex but logical, challenging but achievable, creating cloth of remarkable depth and texture. "Thank you," Sarah said when she had mastered it. "I'll honor this gift. I'll pass it forward when the time is right." Anna died peacefully a week later in her cottage with Sarah and several other friends present. She had lived exactly as she wanted, had died without fear or regret. Her memorial service was held in the meadow near her cottage, attended by dozens of people whose lives she had touched. Sarah spoke at the service. "Anna showed me that a different life was possible. When I was lost, she welcomed me. When I was ready, she taught me. She gave me craft and wisdom and friendship.
I hope to honor her memory by giving the same gifts to others, by continuing to teach and welcome and show that craft life is possible and good. Anna's cottage became a sort of shrine. The maker community preserved it, keeping it as Anna had left it, her loom still threaded, her tools still arranged just so. They used it for gatherings and as a guest space for visiting craftspeople. Anna's spirit remained in the cottage, in the patterns she had woven, in the knowledge she had passed on. Sarah felt Anna's loss deeply. Anna had been her teacher, mentor, friend, the person who had transformed Sarah's life. Sarah honored that gift by teaching more, by welcoming more apprentices, by being for others what Anna had been for her. One of her new apprentices was a woman named Claire, who reminded Sarah remarkably of herself at 42. Claire was 45, burned out from a career in advertising, seeking something more meaningful. She had stumbled across the maker community while on vacation, had visited Sarah's studio, had felt that same call Sarah had felt years ago. Sarah took Claire on as an apprentice, taught her as Anna had taught Sarah. The cycle continued. Knowledge flowed forward. The chain remained unbroken. Claire learned eagerly, asking endless questions, practicing obsessively. She was building not just skills, but a new identity, a new way of being in the world. Sarah watched her transformation with recognition and satisfaction. "You remind me of myself when I started, that same hunger for something different, that same commitment to learning. You'll do well in this life."
"I hope so," Claire said. "Right now I'm terrified. I've quit my job, sold my condo, moved to the countryside. What if I fail? What if I can't make this work?" Sarah smiled. "Those are the right fears. They show you're taking it seriously, but don't let them stop you. Anna told me once, failure isn't the worst thing. Not trying is the worst thing. If you fail, you'll learn. If you don't try, you'll just regret." Claire worked through her fear and doubt. She set up her own small studio, began producing work to sell, slowly built a sustainable craft practice. She was another link in the chain, another person who chose craft over convention. As Sarah moved through her mid-50s, she thought often about legacy. She had no children, would leave no genetic descendants, but she had students, people she had taught, people whose lives she had influenced. That was her legacy. The knowledge passed forward, the craft kept alive, the example shown that different life was possible. She also had her work, hundreds of pieces of woven cloth out in the world, being used, being treasured, bringing beauty into daily life. Some would last decades, maybe centuries if cared for properly. Long after Sarah was gone, her work would remain, carrying her intention and care forward into the future. This felt like enough, more than enough. Sarah had lived well, had done meaningful work, had helped others find their paths. What more could anyone ask for?
In Sarah's 60th year, something unexpected happened. A film student doing a project on traditional crafts asked to make a documentary about the maker community. Sarah agreed to participate, along with several other craftspeople. The student, a young woman named Jade, spent months filming. She captured them at work, Sarah at her loom, Thomas at his workbench, Marcus at his pottery wheel, Elena weaving baskets. She filmed markets and gatherings and the annual craft fair. She interviewed people about their journeys, their choices, their philosophies. The resulting documentary was beautiful. Jade had captured not just the physical work, but the meaning behind it, the values that guided these lives. She had shown craft not as escape or nostalgia, but as genuine alternative, as viable way of being in the modern world. The documentary was shown at film festivals, then picked up by a streaming service. Suddenly, millions of people were watching it, were learning about this small community of makers, were seeing that craft life was possible. The response was overwhelming. Sarah received emails from people all over the world, from Japan, Germany, Brazil, Australia. People shared how the documentary had inspired them, how they were thinking about making similar changes, how seeing craft life lived well had given them courage. Some people visited. A steady stream of curious seekers came to the area, wanting to meet the craftspeople, to see their studios, to learn if this life might be for them. The maker community welcomed them, showed them around, answered questions honestly about both the joys and challenges. Some visitors stayed. They found properties, apprenticed with established makers, began their own craft practices. The community grew. New studios opened. The craft school expanded. The area was becoming known as a center for traditional crafts, attracting both makers and customers.
Sarah had mixed feelings about this growth. Part of her loved that more people were discovering craft life, that the movement was spreading. But part of her worried about losing what made the community special, the intimacy, the slowness, the authenticity. The community discussed this challenge at their monthly gathering. How could they welcome growth while maintaining values? How could they share knowledge without becoming commercialized? How could they stay true to craft principles while adapting to increased attention? They decided on several guidelines. First, anyone who wanted to join the community had to commit to actual craft practice, not just lifestyle tourism. Second, apprenticeships would remain long and demanding, ensuring people were serious. Third, they would resist pressure to industrialize or scale up. Craft meant handwork, meant one maker responsible for entire piece. These guidelines helped. Some visitors left when they realized craft life meant hard work, not romantic fantasy. Those who stayed were genuinely committed. The community grew, but remained authentic. Sarah continued teaching, continued weaving, continued living the simple life she had built. The attention didn't change her daily practice. She still woke with sun, worked at her loom, tended her garden, spent evenings with Thomas. The external world might have noticed her, but her inner world remained focused on the work, on the practice, on the quiet satisfactions of craft. She was invited to give talks at conferences and universities, to write articles about craft life, to serve on panels about traditional skills. She accepted some invitations, declined others. She didn't want to become a spokesperson or celebrity. She just wanted to make cloth and teach those who genuinely wanted to learn. But she did write one piece that was widely shared, an essay about what craft had taught her. She wrote about patience, about presence, about the satisfaction of work completed with your own hands,
about how modern life made people feel disconnected and purposeless, but craft reconnected you to materials, to history, to human tradition of making. About how simple living was actually rich living when it was chosen consciously. The essay resonated with thousands of people. Sarah received letters from readers saying it had changed how they thought about work, about success, about what mattered in life. Some said it had inspired them to leave unsatisfying careers and pursue meaningful work. These letters moved Sarah deeply. She understood now that her story, her choices, her life could serve others. Not everyone would or should become a weaver, but everyone could apply craft principles, patience, attention, quality over quantity, meaning over money, to whatever work they did. She had become, without intending it, a teacher not just of weaving, but of a way of life. This was Anna's legacy flowing through her, amplified and extended. Anna had shown Sarah the possibility. Sarah was now showing others, and those others would show still others. The knowledge rippled outward, touching lives far beyond what Sarah could see.
Sarah worked well into her 70s. Her hands remained strong and skilled, her eyes clear enough to see fine threads. She wove more slowly than in her prime, taking more breaks, working shorter days. But the work itself remained satisfying, meditative, meaningful. She had been weaving for over 30 years now, 30 years of daily practice, of hands moving in familiar patterns, of cloth emerging thread by thread. She had made thousands of pieces, scarves and blankets, rugs and tapestries, simple cloth and complex art. Her work was in museums, galleries, homes across the country and beyond.
But Sarah cared little about recognition. What mattered was the work itself, the daily practice, the meditation of weaving. She sat at her loom not for fame or money, but because weaving was her way of being present, of creating meaning, of connecting to something larger than herself. Thomas was aging too, in his 80s now. His furniture making had slowed, but he still worked, still carved and joined wood with practiced skill. They worked side by side, each in their own craft, content in shared silence, punctuated by conversation. They talked about their years together, about the life they had built, about choosing meaning over convention, about craft over commerce, about simplicity over complexity. Neither regretted their choices. They had lived well, had done work they believed in, had influenced others toward better lives. The maker community continued thriving. New craftspeople kept arriving, learning, contributing. The craft school was established and respected, teaching traditional skills to hundreds of students each year. The annual fair drew thousands of visitors. The area was known globally as a center for craft and simple living. Sarah had trained over 20 apprentices in her years of teaching. Several had become master weavers themselves, were now training their own students. The knowledge flowed forward, the chain remained unbroken. Weaving would continue long after Sarah was gone, carried by people she had taught and people they would teach in turn. She had also maintained Anna's cottage, keeping it as a retreat space and teaching studio. Young weavers would stay there, would work at Anna's loom, would feel her presence in the space. Anna's memory remained alive,
her influence continuing through all the people she had taught directly and the many more she had taught indirectly through her students. One summer evening, Sarah sat outside her cabin watching the sunset. Her hands rested in her lap, tired from a day's weaving. Thomas sat beside her, his own hands rough from wood and tools. They watched light fade from gold to pink to purple, listened to crickets begin their evening song. "We've had a good life," Thomas said. "Yes," Sarah agreed, "a very good life." She thought about her journey, from stressed city dweller to peaceful weaver, from lost to found, from following others' patterns to creating her own. She had taken enormous risk, had made radical changes, had built a completely different life. It had worked. She had succeeded not by conventional measures, but by the only measures that mattered: meaning, satisfaction, contribution. She looked at the cabin, small and simple, but perfect for her needs, at the garden, abundant with vegetables and flowers, at the studio where her loom stood ready for tomorrow's work, at Thomas beside her, companion and partner in this life they had chosen together. She felt content, completely, deeply content. She had enough. She was enough. The life she had woven, thread by thread, choice by choice, was exactly right. As darkness fell and stars emerged, Sarah and Thomas went inside. Sarah looked at her loom one last time before bed, touched the threads with affection, felt gratitude for this work that had saved her, transformed her, given her purpose. Tomorrow she would weave again, and the day after that, and the day after that. For as long as her hands could work, she would continue. Not because she had to, but because she chose to, because weaving was her practice, her meditation, her way of being fully alive. The threads would continue. The pattern would emerge. The cloth would grow. And Sarah would weave it one day at a time, one thread at a time, creating beauty and meaning with her own hands until the very end. Sleep now, dear listener. Let Sarah's story comfort you. Know that it's never too late to change, never too late to discover your true work, never too late to weave a new pattern for your life. Rest peacefully. Dream of threads and looms, of hands creating beauty, of simple lives richly lived. Dream of patterns breaking and new patterns emerging, of courage to change and satisfaction in meaningful work. All is well. The weaving continues. The threads connect us all, now and always. Sweet dreams.
Sarah's reputation grew steadily through her 60s and into her 70s. She was now recognized as one of the finest weavers in the region, perhaps the country. Museums acquired her pieces for permanent collections. Collectors sought her work. Universities invited her to speak about craft and philosophy. But Sarah remained grounded. Fame didn't change her daily practice or her values. She still lived in the same cabin, still woke with the sun to weave, still tended her garden and lived simply. Recognition was nice, but not necessary. The work itself was the reward. She did accept one significant commission,
A large museum was creating an exhibition about traditional American crafts and wanted Sarah to weave a major piece specifically for it. They offered her complete creative freedom and a substantial payment. Sarah thought carefully before accepting. She rarely took commissions. She preferred to weave what called to her rather than what was asked of her. But this commission intrigued her. A major piece for a major museum, her work reaching thousands of people, representing craft at its highest level. She agreed. The museum wanted the piece to reflect her entire journey, from beginner to master, from city life to craft life, from following others' patterns to creating her own. They gave her a year to complete it. Sarah designed the most ambitious piece she had ever attempted, a large tapestry 6 feet wide by 8 feet tall, telling the story of transformation through abstract patterns and colors. She would use every technique she had mastered over 30 years, would create something that honored Anna's teaching while showing Sarah's own artistic vision. The work consumed her. She spent months on the initial design alone, sketching patterns, choosing colors, calculating thread requirements. She hand-dyed all the yarn herself, using plants from her garden and the forest, indigo for blues, madder for reds, weld for yellows, walnut hulls for browns. Threading the loom took a week. Thousands of individual threads had to be measured, ordered, attached in precise sequence. Sarah's hands knew the work, but her mind had to stay completely focused. One mistake in threading could affect the entire piece.
Then came the weaving itself. Day after day, week after week, month after month, Sarah worked steadily, mindfully, maintaining consistent tension and rhythm. The pattern was complex, requiring careful attention to lifting sequences. She couldn't rush, couldn't make mistakes. Thomas supported her completely. He handled household tasks so Sarah could focus on weaving. He brought her meals, made sure she took breaks, massaged her hands when they cramped from hours of work. He understood the importance of this piece, the culmination it represented. Claire, now an established weaver herself, visited regularly to check on progress and offer encouragement. Other apprentices came to watch, to learn from observing Sarah work at this level. The tapestry was becoming legendary even before completion. Sarah worked through all seasons. Spring turned to summer, summer to autumn, autumn to winter. The tapestry grew slowly, steadily. Patterns emerged, colors interacted. The story told itself in cloth. Sarah had designed the piece to be readable on multiple levels. Superficially, it was just beautiful abstract design, flowing lines and balanced colors. But for those who looked deeper, patterns told stories. The rigid grid at the bottom represented Sarah's old structured life. The breaking apart in the middle showed transformation and chaos. The flowing organic patterns at the top showed new life, craft life, connection to nature. Colors also carried meaning. Grays and browns at the bottom, the dull colors of city life. Greens and blues in the middle, nature calling, water and forest. Rich earth tones at the top, connection to land, to materials, to authentic life. The weaving was meditation, hours at the loom, hands moving in rhythm, mind quiet and focused.
Sarah entered deep flow states, losing track of time, becoming one with the work. This was craft at its purest, no separation between maker and making, between artist and art. After 11 months, the tapestry was complete. Sarah wove the final threads, secured the ends, cut it from the loom. She spread it out to examine in full. It was beautiful, powerful, her masterwork, the culmination of decades of practice and life experience. Thomas stood beside her, looking at the finished piece. "It's magnificent," he said quietly, "your finest work." Sarah felt proud, but also humble. "I couldn't have made this when I started. It required everything I've learned: technical skill, artistic vision, life experience, spiritual depth. It's not just woven cloth, it's my entire journey made visible." The museum sent representatives to collect the piece. They handled it with reverence, understood its importance. The exhibition would open in 3 months. Sarah's tapestry would be the centerpiece, would represent craft's highest possibilities. When the piece was gone, Sarah felt both satisfied and empty. She had poured so much into it, had worked so intensely for so long. Now what? Thomas understood. "You need to rest," he said. "You've been weaving intensely for almost a year. Take time to recover, to restore yourself." Sarah did rest. She took several weeks away from the loom entirely. She walked in the forest, tended her garden, read books she had been meaning to read. She visited friends, caught up on correspondence, slept long hours. Slowly, she recovered her energy. And slowly, she began to feel the pull back to weaving. Not big, ambitious projects, just simple pieces. Scarves, placemats, small things made for the joy of making, rather than for any external purpose. She realized something important. The tapestry had been wonderful to create, and she was proud of it. But she didn't need to make masterpieces. She didn't need recognition or fame. She just needed to weave, to maintain her practice, to keep her hands and heart connected to the craft. Simple work was enough. Daily practice was enough. Making beautiful, useful things for their own sake, that was enough. The museum exhibition opened to critical acclaim. Sarah's tapestry was featured prominently, praised by critics as a masterwork of contemporary craft. Articles were written about it, photographs published widely. Sarah received congratulatory messages from fellow craftspeople, former students, admirers of her work. The museum invited Sarah to attend the opening. She was reluctant. She disliked formal events, preferred her quiet life in the woods. But Thomas convinced her to go. This was important, represented a culmination of her life's work. She should be present. They traveled to the city together. Sarah hadn't been in a city for over 30 years, not since leaving her old life. The experience was jarring. So many people, so much noise, such constant motion. Buildings pressed in from all sides. Cars and buses choked the streets. Everyone seemed to be rushing somewhere. Sarah felt overwhelmed. How had she lived like this? How had anyone lived like this? The city that had once seemed normal now seemed almost uninhabitable. Too crowded, too loud, too fast, too disconnected from nature and natural rhythms. But the museum was beautiful, calm and spacious, with good light and careful curation. The craft exhibition was thoughtfully presented, each piece given space to be appreciated properly. Sarah's tapestry hung on a large wall in the main gallery. Seeing it here, properly displayed and lit, Sarah felt the impact of the piece more fully. It was powerful. It commanded attention. People stopped before it, studied it, seemed moved by it. At the opening reception, people congratulated Sarah, asked about her process, wanted to discuss the piece's meaning. She answered questions politely, but was uncomfortable with the attention. She preferred to let the work speak for itself. One conversation stood out. A young woman, perhaps 30, approached Sarah with tears in her eyes. "Your tapestry changed my life," she said. "I work in corporate law. I'm miserable. I've been afraid to change, to pursue what I really want. But seeing your work, reading about your journey, it gave me courage. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to find my own path." Sarah was deeply moved. This was why the work mattered, not for critical praise or museum recognition, but for impact on real people, for inspiring transformation in others. "What do you really want to do?" Sarah asked the woman. "I want to make pottery," she admitted. "I took a class once and loved it, but it seemed impractical, impossible to build a life around. Your story showed me it is possible, that others have done it."
"It's possible," Sarah confirmed, "but also difficult. Don't romanticize it. Craft life is hard work, financially uncertain, sometimes lonely. But if making pottery calls to you deeply, if you can't imagine being happy doing anything else, then yes, try it. Take the risk." The woman thanked Sarah and left with determination in her eyes. Sarah watched her go, hoping she would find her path, knowing that even if she failed at pottery specifically, the courage to try would serve her well. The exhibition ran for 6 months. During that time, thousands of people saw Sarah's tapestry. Some were moved by it, inspired by it. Some left the museum determined to make changes in their own lives, to pursue meaningful work, to choose craft over convention. Sarah didn't see most of this impact. She returned to her cabin after the opening and resumed her quiet life. But she received letters from people who had seen the piece, who wanted to thank her, who shared how it had affected them. Each letter reminded Sarah why she had chosen this path, not for personal gain, but for contribution, not to become famous, but to make beautiful things and to show others that craft life was possible and good. After the exhibition, the museum wanted to acquire the tapestry for their permanent collection. Sarah agreed. The piece would stay there, would continue inspiring people for years or decades to come. This felt right. Art belonged in the world, not hidden away in an artist's studio. The museum payment was substantial. Sarah used some of it to improve her cabin and studio, to buy better equipment, to donate to the craft school. But she put most of it aside. She didn't need much money. Her simple life required little. The payment was nice, but not transformative. Her life was already exactly as she wanted. As Sarah moved through her mid-70s, she took on a new role. She began training master teachers, experienced weavers who wanted to teach but needed guidance on how to teach effectively. This was different from training apprentices in weaving technique. This was teaching about teaching itself, how to assess students' readiness, how to sequence lessons for maximum learning,
how to balance challenge and support, how to inspire without overwhelming. Sarah discovered she had deep knowledge about teaching that she had accumulated unconsciously over years of working with apprentices. Now she made that knowledge conscious and explicit, codifying it so others could learn from her experience. She would spend weeks with teacher trainees, showing them how she worked with students, explaining her pedagogical choices, giving them opportunities to practice teaching under her supervision. It was demanding work, but satisfying. She was multiplying her impact. Each teacher she trained would teach dozens or hundreds of students over their careers. One teacher trainee was a woman named Patricia, who had been weaving for 20 years and wanted to open a weaving school. She came to study with Sarah for a month, observing her work with current apprentices, learning Sarah's teaching philosophy and methods. "You make it look effortless," Patricia said one evening. "You know exactly when to intervene and when to let students struggle, when to demonstrate and when to explain, when to encourage and when to critique. How did you develop this intuition?"
By making many mistakes, Sarah said honestly. By paying attention to what worked and what didn't. By remembering what helped me when I was learning and what confused me. Teaching is a craft like weaving. You get better with practice. Sarah also emphasized the importance of teaching values along with technique. Technical skill matters, she told Patricia, but values matter more. Teach patience, attention, respect for materials, commitment to quality. Teach students to value process over product, to find satisfaction in the work itself rather than external recognition. If you teach these values, students will become not just skilled weavers, but good people. Patricia absorbed all of this, took extensive notes, asked thoughtful questions. By the end of her month with Sarah, she was ready to open her school. She returned home inspired and equipped to teach well. Sarah trained 5 master teachers over several years. Each opened their own schools or programs. Each trained their own students. The knowledge Sarah had received from Anna, had developed through her own practice and teaching, was now spreading widely. Hundreds of people would learn weaving through teachers Sarah had trained, would learn not just technique, but philosophy, would carry forward the values of craft and simple living. This felt like important work. Sarah was in her late 70s now, couldn't weave as intensely or as long as she once had, but she could still teach, could still share knowledge, could still influence the craft's future. She also worked on documenting her knowledge in writing. She wrote detailed manuals on weaving techniques, on setting up a craft practice, on teaching weaving to others. She wanted to preserve what she had learned, to make it accessible to people she would never meet personally. The writing was challenging. Sarah had to translate intuitive knowledge into explicit instructions, had to find words for things she normally just did. But the effort was worthwhile. The manuals would outlive her, would continue teaching long after she was gone. When Sarah was 78, she took on what she said would be her last 2 apprentices. She was aging now, energy declining, hands not as strong as they had been. She wanted to focus her remaining teaching energy on 2 final students who would carry her knowledge forward with particular care and commitment. The first was a young man named Daniel,
25 years old, who had studied textile arts in college but felt disconnected from the overly conceptual approach taught there. He wanted to learn traditional craft, to understand weaving as practice rather than just intellectual pursuit. The second was an older woman named Grace, 55, who had practiced meditation for decades and was drawn to weaving as a contemplative practice. She wanted to learn not primarily to make cloth to sell, but to develop weaving as spiritual discipline. Sarah worked with them intensively for a year. Daniel learned quickly, had natural talent, developed strong technical skills. But Sarah pushed him to go deeper, to understand weaving not just as technical accomplishment, but as way of being. "You can make technically perfect cloth," Sarah told him, "but if you're tense and rushed while making it, that energy goes into the cloth. Learn to weave from a place of calm presence. The cloth will be better, and the practice will transform you." Grace had the opposite challenge. She understood the contemplative aspect naturally, but struggled with technical precision. Sarah taught her that precision and presence weren't opposed, but complementary.
Being fully present means attending to every detail, Sarah explained. Meditation isn't about spacing out. It's about being completely here, completely attentive. Technical precision is a form of presence. Both students grew tremendously over the year. Daniel's weaving became not just skillful, but soulful. Grace's work became technically sound while maintaining its meditative quality. They were learning what Sarah had learned from Anna, that craft was a complete practice, engaging hands and heart and mind together. Toward the end of their apprenticeship, Sarah taught them Anna's special pattern, the one Anna had shown Sarah on her deathbed. Sarah explained its history, its significance, the honor of receiving such knowledge. "This pattern represents lineage," Sarah told them. "It connects you to generations of weavers stretching back centuries. When you weave this pattern, you're part of that lineage. You have a responsibility to honor it and to pass it forward when your time comes." Both Daniel and Grace were moved by this. They wove the pattern carefully, reverently, understanding they were receiving something precious. When their formal apprenticeship ended, both stayed in the area. Daniel opened a small weaving studio and began teaching beginner classes. Grace integrated weaving into her meditative practice and eventually began offering workshops on contemplative craft. Sarah watched them establish themselves with satisfaction. These would be her final direct students, but they would teach many others. The knowledge would continue flowing forward. Sarah's 80th birthday became an occasion for celebration. The maker community organized a large gathering. Current craftspeople, former apprentices coming from far away, teacher trainees, students from the craft school, friends and neighbors. They held the celebration in the meadow near Anna's cottage, the same place where Anna's memorial had been held years before. Over 100 people came. Tables were set up with food everyone had brought. Music played. People shared stories about Sarah,
about what she had taught them, about how she had influenced their lives. Former apprentices stood to speak. Maya talked about being Sarah's first student, about how Sarah had given her the same gift Anna had given Sarah, the knowledge that craft life was possible. Claire shared how Sarah had welcomed her when she was lost, had taught her not just weaving, but a new way of living. Each former student had similar stories of transformation and gratitude. Thomas spoke last. "Sarah and I have shared our lives for over 30 years, he said. I've watched her become a master weaver, a master teacher, a master of the art of living well. She's shown that simple life built around meaningful work is not only possible, but deeply satisfying. She's inspired hundreds of people to choose craft over convention, to build lives of purpose and beauty. I'm honored to share my life with her." Sarah was overwhelmed by the love and appreciation. She stood to respond, emotional but composed. "I've been lucky," she said. "Lucky to find Anna when I was lost, lucky to discover weaving, lucky to live in this community of makers, lucky to have students who taught me as much as I taught them, lucky to share my life with Thomas. I haven't done anything special. I just found work I loved and did it for a long time."
But if my example has helped others find their own paths, then my life has meaning beyond my own satisfaction. Thank you all for being part of my journey. The celebration continued into the evening. People wove tributes to Sarah on portable looms. Musicians played. Children ran through the meadow. It was joyful and moving, a proper honoring of a life well lived. As darkness fell and people began to leave, Sarah sat with Thomas, watching the last of the celebration. She felt content. Her life had been good. She had done meaningful work, had helped many people, had lived according to her values. What more could anyone want? "How do you feel about getting old?" Thomas asked. He was 85 now, himself feeling the weight of years. "Peaceful," Sarah said honestly. "I've lived well. I've done my work. Whatever time remains is bonus. I'm not afraid of death. I'm grateful for life." They sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged above. Two old people who had chosen craft and simplicity, who had built a good life together, who were content with what they had created. Sarah continued weaving into her 80s, though at a much slower pace. Her hands were arthritic now, her vision less sharp, her energy limited. She would weave for an hour or two each day, making small, simple pieces, scarves mostly, occasionally placemats. The quality remained high. Even with physical limitations, her hands knew exactly what to do. Decades of practice had created muscle memory that transcended current capability. Her simple scarves were beautiful, perfectly balanced, with the quiet elegance that had become her signature. She sold these pieces at the monthly market, pricing them modestly despite their quality. She didn't need money. Thomas's furniture sales and their savings were sufficient. She wove and sold for the joy of it, for maintaining connection to her practice and community. She also spent significant time with current students and craftspeople, serving as mentor and elder.
Young weavers would visit seeking advice on technical problems, on business challenges, on maintaining motivation during difficult periods. Sarah shared freely from her experience. One young weaver named Sophie was struggling with whether to lower her prices to compete with machine-made cloth. Sarah counseled her firmly. "Never compete on price," Sarah said. "You can't. Machines will always be cheaper. Compete on quality, on the story behind your work, on the values you represent. People who buy handmade cloth aren't just buying cloth. They're supporting craft, supporting the maker, making an ethical choice. Price your work fairly for the time and skill required. The right customers will pay." Sophie took the advice and raised her prices instead of lowering them. Her sales didn't decrease. In fact, they increased slightly. People valued her work when it was priced appropriately. Sarah also worked on her memoirs, writing about her journey from city accountant to rural weaver, from lost to found, from following patterns to creating them. The writing was slow. Her hands could only type for short periods, but she persisted.
She wanted to document not just events, but understanding. What had she learned from decades of weaving? What wisdom could she pass to those who would never meet her personally? She wrote about patience learned from thousands of hours at the loom, about presence cultivated through mindful practice, about satisfaction found in simple work well done. The memoir became a book, published by a small press that specialized in craft writing. It sold modestly, but found its audience, people interested in craft, in simple living, in life transformation. Sarah received letters from readers thanking her for sharing her story, for showing that change was possible, for articulating what craft and simple living meant. One letter particularly moved her. It came from a corporate executive, 45 years old, who had read Sarah's memoir during a particularly difficult period. "Your story gave me permission to imagine a different life," the woman wrote. "I haven't quit my job yet. I might never become a weaver, but I've started taking pottery classes. I'm learning to garden. I'm simplifying my life, questioning my assumptions. You've shown me that the life I'm living isn't the only possible life. Thank you for that gift." Sarah understood. Not everyone needed to become a full-time craftsperson, but everyone could benefit from craft values: patience, presence, mindful work, connection to materials. The specific craft mattered less than the principles behind it. As Sarah moved through her mid-80s, she thought more about death, not with fear, but with curiosity and acceptance. She had lived a full life, had accomplished what she set out to accomplish. She was ready for whatever came next. She made plans. Her will left the cabin and land to Thomas, with the understanding he would pass it to a craftsperson when his time came. Her looms and tools would go to apprentices who could use them well. Her remaining pieces would be sold, with proceeds going to the craft school scholarship fund. She wanted her funeral to be simple, a gathering in the meadow, casual and celebratory. Music, storytelling, weaving. She didn't want sadness or formality. She wanted her life celebrated as she had lived it, simply, joyfully, connected to community and craft. Thomas understood and supported all of this. He was old himself, knew his own time was limited. They talked openly about death, about what came after, about how they wanted to be remembered.
"We've had a good run," Thomas said one evening. They were sitting outside, watching sunset, as they had done thousands of times before. "A very good run," Sarah agreed. "No regrets. We chose well, lived well, loved well. What more could anyone ask?" They sat in peace, two old makers, grateful for life, ready for whatever came next.
Sarah died quietly at 87. She had been weaving in the afternoon, working on a scarf in shades of blue and gray, like the ocean she had only seen a few times in her life, but had always loved. She finished the piece, secured the ends, cut it from the loom. Then she sat back, closed her eyes, and her heart simply stopped. Thomas found her there, peaceful in her chair by the loom, the finished scarf in her lap. He sat with her for a long time, holding her hand, saying goodbye to the woman who had shared his life for over 30 years. The community gathered for her memorial, as she had requested, in the meadow, informal and celebratory. People told stories about Sarah, about what she had taught them, about how she had lived. Musicians played the folk songs she had loved. Current weavers brought portable looms and wove during the gathering, honoring Sarah's life by doing the work she had loved. Daniel, now an established weaver and teacher, spoke about what Sarah had given him. "Sarah showed me that craft wasn't just about making objects, but about making a life. She taught me that quality mattered more than quantity, that presence mattered more than productivity, that simple living aligned with values was richer than luxury misaligned with purpose. I teach these lessons to my own students now. Sarah's wisdom flows forward." Grace talked about the contemplative dimension of Sarah's teaching. Sarah understood weaving as meditation, as spiritual practice. She showed that focused attention to craftwork was a form of prayer, a way of being fully present in the moment. This understanding transformed not just my weaving, but my entire life. Thomas spoke last, his voice trembling but strong. Sarah was my partner, my companion, my inspiration. She taught me that love didn't require constant attention or dramatic gestures. Love was working side by side, respecting each other's craft, sharing simple pleasures. She made me better as a maker, as a person. I'll miss her terribly, but I'm grateful for every day we shared. They scattered Sarah's ashes in the meadow, among the wildflowers, where they would nourish the soil and become part of the place she had loved. Sarah had lived close to the earth. Now she would return to it completely. The cabin and studio passed to Thomas. He continued living there, continuing his furniture making, though more slowly now. Young craftspeople would visit, drawn by the space's history, by the knowledge that Sarah had lived and worked there. Thomas would show Sarah's looms, would share stories, would pass on what he remembered of her teaching. The craft school established the Sarah Morrison Memorial Scholarship for students interested in weaving. Each year, several apprentices could study for free, supported by funds from sales of Sarah's remaining work and by donations from people whose lives she had touched. Her memoir continued selling steadily,
finding new readers, inspiring new transformations. People would read about her journey and feel courage to make their own changes, to leave unfulfilling work, to pursue meaningful craft, to build simpler lives aligned with deeper values. The tapestry in the museum became an icon of contemporary craft. People would travel specifically to see it, would stand before it moved by its beauty and the story it told. Teachers would bring student groups to study it. Young weavers would be inspired by it to pursue their own craft seriously. But Sarah's truest legacy was in people. The students she had taught directly, the teachers she had trained, the craftspeople she had inspired from afar. Each of them carried forward some piece of her knowledge, her values, her vision of what craft life could be. The lineage continued. Daniel taught students who would teach others. Grace integrated weaving and contemplation, creating a whole school of meditative craft. The teachers Sarah had trained opened programs across the country. The knowledge flowed forward like a river, spreading and branching, but never drying up. And in the meadow where Sarah's ashes were scattered, wildflowers bloomed each spring, blue and purple and white, dancing in the wind, returning each year, beautiful and simple and true, like Sarah's life, like Sarah's work, like the pattern she had woven from the threads of her days. The weaver's cottage still stands in the woods. New makers live there now, working at Sarah's old looms, keeping the craft alive. They don't know Sarah personally, but they know her story. They understand they're part of something larger than themselves, part of a lineage of makers stretching back through Anna, through countless other weavers, back to the first humans who twisted fibers into thread and thread into cloth. They weave on, these new makers, continuing the ancient craft, honoring the tradition, creating beauty and meaning thread by thread, day by day, following the path Sarah showed was possible, the path of craft, simplicity, presence, and purpose. The loom sits ready, the threads are taut, the shuttle waits, and somewhere someone is learning to weave, learning to center themselves, learning to create beauty with patience and presence and care. The pattern continues, the thread never breaks, the weaving goes on forever. Now and always and eternal. Sweet dreams.
20 years after Sarah's death, a woman named Jennifer stood in the museum looking at Sarah's tapestry. Jennifer was 38 years old, the same age Sarah had been when she discovered weaving. Like Sarah, Jennifer worked in a corporate job she no longer loved. Like Sarah, she felt lost, empty, searching for something more. Jennifer had come to the museum seeking distraction from her dissatisfaction. She wandered through the craft exhibition without much interest until she saw the tapestry. Something about it stopped her. She stood before it, studying the patterns, the colors, the way threads wove together to tell a story. A placard beside the tapestry told Sarah's story. Corporate career abandoned at 42. Discovery of weaving. Building a life around craft. Decades of simple living, meaningful work, profound satisfaction.
The tapestry itself told the same story in visual form, rigid patterns breaking apart, transforming into flowing organic beauty. Jennifer read the story 3 times. Her hands trembled slightly. This was her, or could be her. Someone who had felt exactly what she was feeling, who had found a way out, who had built a different kind of life. She bought Sarah's memoir in the museum shop. She read it that evening in one sitting, unable to put it down. Sarah's words spoke directly to her situation, her feelings, her fears. The book was practical too, not just inspiring, but instructive, offering concrete guidance about how to make such a change. Over the following weeks, Jennifer couldn't stop thinking about Sarah's story. She researched craft practices, visited local studios, took a weekend weaving workshop. She felt something awaken in her, a desire to make things, to work with her hands, to build a life of purpose rather than just profit.
But she was afraid. She had responsibilities, a mortgage, retirement savings. What if she failed? What if craft life wasn't as wonderful as it seemed in Sarah's memoir? What if she was just having a midlife crisis? Jennifer visited the museum again, stood again before Sarah's tapestry. She studied it closely, noticed details she had missed before. The precision of the weaving, the subtle color variations, the confidence in the pattern choices. This wasn't made by someone uncertain or romantic. This was made by a master, by someone who had found their true work and dedicated themselves to it completely. In the reflection on the glass protecting the tapestry, Jennifer saw her own face superimposed on Sarah's work. She saw herself as she was, tired, unfulfilled, going through motions. But she also saw possibility, a different version of herself, transformed through courage and choice. She made a decision. She would start small, wouldn't quit her job immediately. She would take classes, learn skills, test whether craft truly called to her or was just escape fantasy. She would give herself a year to explore seriously before making any irreversible changes. Jennifer signed up for regular weaving classes. She practiced at home on a small loom. She visited the craft community that had grown around Sarah's legacy, talked to makers about their lives, learned both the joys and challenges of craft work. The more she learned, the more certain she became. Weaving did call to her. The feel of thread in her hands, the rhythm of the shuttle, the meditation of repetitive motion, it all felt right in a way her office work never had. After a year of preparation, Jennifer gave notice at her job. Her colleagues thought she was crazy, just as Sarah's had, but Jennifer didn't care. She had found her path. She had seen proof in Sarah's life that this path was viable, could lead to satisfaction and meaning. She moved to the countryside near where Sarah had lived. She rented a small cottage. She apprenticed with one of Sarah's former students. She learned not just technique, but philosophy, the values Sarah had taught, the approach to craft and life that had made her journey successful. Jennifer was scared sometimes. The uncertainty was real. Money was tight. The work was harder than she had imagined, but she was alive in a way she hadn't been for years. She woke excited to work. She went to bed satisfied with what she had made. She felt purpose. 5 years later, Jennifer had her own small weaving practice. She sold her work at markets and through local shops. She lived simply in her cottage, grew much of her own food, needed little money.
She was happy, genuinely, deeply happy. She had followed Sarah's pattern, had made the same brave choice, had discovered the same truth that craft life, while challenging, offered meaning that conventional success never could. Jennifer visited the museum occasionally, always stopping to spend time with Sarah's tapestry. She felt gratitude for this woman she had never met, whose story had given her courage, whose work had shown that transformation was possible. She understood now that Sarah's real masterpiece wasn't the tapestry hanging in the museum. Sarah's masterpiece was her life, the choices she made, the values she lived by, the people she inspired, the knowledge she passed forward. The tapestry was beautiful, yes, but it was just cloth, threads woven together. Sarah's life was the true work of art, a life woven intentionally, thread by thread, choice by choice, into something beautiful and meaningful and true.
And that pattern of transformation, of courage, of choosing meaning over money, that pattern was still being woven by Jennifer, by dozens of others inspired by Sarah's story, by anyone who had the courage to leave unfulfilling work and pursue authentic purpose. The thread never breaks. The pattern continues. Each person who chooses craft over convention, simplicity over complexity, presence over productivity, each is another thread in the great tapestry being woven across generations. Sarah started as a single thread, lost and searching. She found her pattern, wove her life beautifully, and in doing so, she became part of a larger pattern, a pattern of transformation, of return to craft and meaning, of humans reconnecting with hands and heart and authentic purpose. That larger pattern keeps growing, keeps evolving, keeps including new threads. Each person who makes the choice, who takes the risk, who builds a different kind of life, they become part of the pattern, add their own color and texture, strengthen the overall design. Jennifer understood this as she stood before Sarah's tapestry one last time before returning home to her own loom, her own work, her own life being woven day by day into whatever beauty she could create. She placed her hand on the glass protecting the tapestry, feeling through the barrier the power of Sarah's work and Sarah's choice. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing the way, for having the courage first so the rest of us could follow, for weaving a life that inspires others to weave their own." The tapestry hung silent, threads holding their patterns, colors still vibrant, Sarah's story still speaking to anyone who would listen. And across the country, across the world, people were listening. People were being inspired. People were making changes, learning crafts, building simpler lives, choosing meaning over money. The weaving continues. The threads multiply. The pattern grows. Sarah's cottage in the woods still stands, occupied now by a young weaver named Rain, who had read Sarah's memoir and been transformed by it. Rain sits at Sarah's old loom, working the same shuttle Sarah once worked, creating new cloth while honoring old traditions. The craft community continues thriving, now over 100 makers strong. The school Sarah helped establish teaches hundreds of students each year. The scholarship bearing her name sends dozens of young people into craft careers. Sarah's apprentices teach their own apprentices. Her teachers train their own teachers. The knowledge flows on like a river, spreading and branching, but never diminishing. In libraries and bookshops, Sarah's memoir sits on shelves, waiting to be discovered by the next searching soul. The museum keeps her tapestry on permanent display, inspiring visitors daily. Her woven pieces exist in homes across the country, being used and treasured. But most of all, Sarah lives in the pattern she started, the pattern of transformation, of courage, of choosing authentic work over conventional success. That pattern keeps being rewoven by each person who reads her story and finds courage to change their own life. The thread never breaks, the weaving never stops, the pattern grows and evolves.
This is craft's real magic. Not just creating beautiful objects, but creating beautiful lives and inspiring others to do the same. Sleep now, dear listener. Wrap yourself in the warmth of Sarah's story. Know that change is possible, that your true work awaits, that the life you're meant to live can be woven from the threads of courage and choice. Rest deeply. Dream of looms and threads, of patterns breaking and reforming, of hands creating beauty. Dream of transformation and purpose and lives well lived. All is well. The threads are strong. The pattern holds. Your own weaving continues tomorrow. Now and always, forever and eternal. The thread that never breaks, the pattern that never ends. Sweet dreams.
Years continue to pass. Decades turn into generations. The world changes in countless ways. New technologies, new challenges, new ways of living. But some things remain constant. In a cottage in the woods, a weaver sits at a loom. The cottage has been rebuilt and improved over the years, but it stands on the same ground where Sarah's cottage stood. The loom is newer, but follows the same design Sarah used. The hands that move the shuttle are different, but they move with the same rhythm, the same intention, the same devotion to craft. This weaver is named Sky. They are 28 years old and came to weaving after reading Sarah's memoir, which is now considered a classic text about craft and transformation. Sky never met Sarah, was born years after her death, but Sarah's influence shaped Sky's life nonetheless. Sky learned from Rain, who learned from Daniel, who learned from Sarah, who learned from Anna. 4 generations of teaching, of knowledge passed hand to hand, heart to heart. The lineage continues unbroken. On the wall of the cottage hangs a photograph of Sarah at her loom, taken when she was in her 70s. Sky looks at it often, draws inspiration from Sarah's calm, focused face, from the beauty of the cloth emerging under her hands. Sky is part of a craft revival happening globally. Young people everywhere are turning to traditional skills, seeking meaning in handwork, building lives around making. The movement Sarah was part of has grown exponentially. There are now thousands of craft communities, millions of makers, a whole cultural shift toward valuing authentic work. But it started with individuals, with Anna choosing to leave the city and become a weaver, with Sarah having the courage to follow, with each subsequent maker making the same brave choice.
Each person a thread, each choice a crossing point. Together, they weave a pattern that spans the world, that connects generations, that shows humanity's enduring need for meaningful work and authentic life. Sky's hands move steadily, the shuttle passing back and forth, the cloth growing slowly. They think about Sarah sometimes, about this woman who lived decades ago, but whose influence still shapes lives today. Sarah, who had the courage to change. Sarah, who mastered her craft. Sarah, who taught generously. Sarah, who lived fully. The pattern Sarah started continues in Sky's hands, in the hands of thousands of other makers, in the choices of millions of people who have been touched directly or indirectly by her story and example. This is immortality, not living forever in body, but living on through influence, through the lives you touch, through the pattern you start that others continue. Sarah lives in every piece of hand-woven cloth, in every person who leaves an unfulfilling career to pursue craft, in every student who learns that patience and presence matter more than speed and productivity. In every moment, someone chooses meaning over money. The thread never breaks. The pattern never ends. The weaving continues through time, eternal and beautiful and true. And somewhere, right now, someone is discovering Sarah's story, reading her memoir, or seeing her tapestry, or hearing about her life from someone she influenced. And that person is thinking, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could change my life. Maybe I could choose craft and meaning and purpose. And if they choose to try, if they find their courage, if they begin their own transformation, then Sarah's pattern grows stronger, includes one more thread, continues one more generation. This is the gift Sarah gave. Not just beautiful cloth, but a pattern for living. Not just inspiration, but instruction. Not just a story, but a path. The gift keeps giving. The pattern keeps growing. The thread keeps weaving on and on and on, eternal and unbreaking, connecting past to present to future, showing that transformation is always possible, that meaning is always available, that a life well lived weaves its influence far beyond one person's span of years. Sleep now, dear listener. Be wrapped in this eternal thread. Know that you too are part of the pattern, that your choices matter, that your life can weave beauty into the world. Rest in peace. Dream in patterns. Wake to possibility. The thread is yours to weave. The pattern waits for your contribution. The loom stands ready, now and forever, always and eternal. Sweet, sweet dreams.
you.